He was a powerful millionaire CEO living in a world of glass towers. She was only 8 years old, carrying nothing but a worn folder and a heart full of courage. When Victoria walked into Mick's office asking for a job, she wasn't looking for money. She was fighting to save her sick mother. What happened next would melt even the coldest heart. This is not just a story of wealth and power, but of kindness, hope, and the lesson that true riches are found in compassion. Mick, the 36-year-old CEO, leaned back in his leather chair. The office around him gleamed with power: glass walls, polished marble floor, shelves lined with awards and trophies. Outside, the skyline of the city stretched endlessly, a picture of wealth and ambition. He checked his schedule again. Personal assistant interview 10 a.m. This was no small role. His assistant had to be sharp, quick, trustworthy. He expected someone with years of experience, someone who could handle the pressure of working beside him. The door creaked open. Without looking up, Mick said calmly, "Come in." He heard soft footsteps. Too soft, too light for an adult. His eyebrows furrowed. Something felt off. When he finally lifted his eyes, he froze. Standing in front of him was not a professional woman in a suit. It was a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old. Her hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, though a few strands had escaped to frame her pale face. Her dress was faded, clearly worn many times before. Her shoes had holes at the tips and the laces dangled like tired threads. But what caught Mick's attention most was the way she clutched a folder to her chest. Not casually, not like someone holding papers, but tightly, desperately, as though it carried her whole life. The girl gave him a nervous smile. Her lips trembled, yet she tried to appear brave. "I came for the job," she whispered, her voice shaking but steady enough to reach his heart. Mick blinked, confused. Was this some kind of mistake? A joke? A prank by one of his employees? But no. Her wide blue eyes were serious, filled with determination no child should ever need. He felt an odd pull inside, a stirring in his chest that he didn't like to admit. For a second, his instinct was to laugh. The idea was absurd, an 8-year-old applying to be his personal assistant. But something about her trembling voice, about the way she stood there with dignity despite her size, stopped him. His laughter died before it could escape. He leaned forward, his deep voice softer than usual. "A job? You're just a child." His words weren't cruel, just bewildered. The girl's chin lifted slightly. Her small shoulders squared as if she had rehearsed this moment. "What's your name?" Mick asked, curiosity pushing through his disbelief. "Victoria," she said bravely. The name rolled off her tongue with unexpected strength, though her voice quivered. She pressed the folder even closer to her chest. "Please, sir," she continued, her eyes shining with something raw, fear and hope mixed together. "I need to work." The office fell silent. The ticking of the clock on the wall suddenly seemed louder than ever. Mick stared at her, his sharp businessman's mind struggling to process the sight before him. Here was a millionaire CEO, a man who handled billion-dollar contracts without blinking. Yet an 8-year-old girl had just walked into his empire and asked him for a job. And for the first time in years, Mick felt something he had long forgotten, his heart shifting, softening. Mick motioned to the chair across from his desk. It was far too big for her, yet she climbed onto it with surprising dignity. Her tiny legs dangled in the air, not even close to touching the ground. She placed the folder on her lap, her small fingers trembling as she opened it. Mick leaned forward, curiosity tightening inside his chest. "What makes you think you need this job, Victoria?" he asked gently. The question hung in the air like a weight. Victoria opened the folder carefully, as if it were a treasure chest. Inside there were no diplomas, no polished resumes. Instead, there were crayon drawings, houses, flowers, a picture of a woman lying in bed with a child standing beside her. There were scraps of paper with notes, written in uneven letters. And at the very top lay a folded letter, the handwriting shaky and childlike. She pushed it across the desk with both hands. Her voice was quiet, but every word stabbed like truth. "Please read it, sir." Mick unfolded the paper slowly. The words were written in large, uneven letters, some backwards, some smudged from erased attempts. "My mama is very sick. My dad left us. I want to help. Please give me work. I can bring you water, clean your office, and write little things. I'll be good. I promise. Mick's throat tightened. He had read thousands of contracts in his life. Agreements worth millions, carefully worded, perfectly typed. But nothing had ever struck him like this letter. It was innocence bleeding through ink. It was desperation hidden behind crayons. It was a cry from a child who had already lost too much. He lifted his eyes and looked at Victoria. Her face was calm, but her eyes betrayed her. Those big blue eyes carried storms, the kind only children forced to grow up too soon could understand. There was no mischief, no playfulness, only determination, fear, and love burning fiercely. Mick leaned back in his chair, trying to breathe evenly. This wasn't a child begging for candy or toys. This was a child begging for survival. His heart, usually guarded by walls of steel, began to crack. Victoria straightened her back, as if afraid he might dismiss her. I can really help, she said, her voice trembling but brave. I can bring you coffee or make notes. I don't mind working hard. Mama needs medicine. I just need a little money. Mick rubbed his temple, his mind spinning. He was a CEO who made cold, logical decisions every day. But this wasn't business. This was humanity staring him in the face. For a moment, he couldn't speak. He just watched her small hands gripping the edge of the folder like it was her lifeline. Her fingernails were chipped. Her dress was clean but clearly second-hand, the fabric fraying at the edges. Every detail screamed of struggle. Victoria, Mick finally said, his voice lower than usual. You're only 8. Children aren't supposed to work. Her lips quivered. For the first time, her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away quickly. I know, she whispered. But if I don't, who will? Mama needs me. That answer pierced him deeper than anything else. She wasn't just a child. She was a soldier fighting for her mother. A warrior in tiny shoes, carrying more weight than most adults ever did. Mick's chest tightened painfully. He had all the money in the world, yet here sat a little girl who carried wealth in love and responsibility. For the first time in a long time, he felt small in front of someone else. Mick leaned back slowly in his chair, his fingers tapping against the armrest. The powerful glass office, usually a place of control, suddenly felt smaller, almost suffocating. For the first time in years, he didn't know what to say. Hiring her was impossible. She was 8, a child who should be holding books, not folders filled with desperation. But the thought of sending her away cut deep into his chest. He looked at her small hands, still gripping that folder as if it contained her whole world. Her nails were chipped, her knuckles pale from clutching too hard. It wasn't just paper she held. It was her mother's life, her hope, her only weapon against poverty. Finally, Mick spoke, his voice low but firm. You can't work for me, Victoria. The words fell heavy, like a door closing. He expected tears. He expected pleading. Instead, she lowered her head, her thin shoulders dropping under invisible weight. Her lips trembled, and for a second he saw her innocence break. But she didn't cry. She simply whispered, almost to herself, I knew you'd say that. Mick's chest tightened. She had walked into this office knowing rejection was likely, yet she came anyway. That kind of courage. He had never seen it, not even in boardrooms filled with grown men fighting for millions. Victoria lifted her eyes again, her voice soft but steady. But I had to try. Mama needs medicine. Her words sliced through Mick like a blade. He had faced investors, lawsuits, scandals. He had signed billion-dollar contracts without blinking, his heart steady as stone. But right now, looking into the pleading eyes of an 8-year-old, he couldn't find words. His throat tightened. His perfectly polished world felt fragile, like this child had stepped in and cracked it open with nothing more than truth. He turned his chair slightly, staring out the tall glass window at the city below. Cars moved like ants. People rushed with briefcases. Deals were being made in towers just like his. And yet somewhere in this same city, a child sat in his office begging not for toys, not for luxury, but for medicine for her mother. What was wealth if it couldn't touch pain like hers? What was power if it couldn't protect innocence like hers? Mick ran his hand through his hair, frustration tightening inside him. Every business instinct told him to say no and move on. But something human, something deeper than business, whispered to him that turning her away would haunt him forever. He turned back to her. She was still sitting there, small legs dangling off the chair, her face pale but brave. Her eyes met his without flinching. There was no manipulation, no trick. Only love for her mother and a desperate will to fight for her. Mick swallowed hard. For the first time in years, his heart overruled his logic. Something inside him shifted, something he thought he had buried long ago. It was compassion. Mick sat in silence after Victoria's brave words, his heart pounding in ways he couldn't explain. He had made 1,000 decisions in his life, decisions that shaped companies, influenced markets, and changed lives. But this one decision felt heavier than all of them combined. "Take me to your mother," he said finally, his voice firm but gentle. Victoria's wide eyes blinked in surprise. Her small lips parted, unsure if she had heard correctly. You want to come to my home?" she asked softly. Mick nodded. "Yes, I need to see for myself." For a brief moment, hesitation clouded her face. Shame lingered there, the fear of letting someone rich and powerful see the cracks of her fragile world. But then, with a small, almost defeated nod, she whispered, "Okay." That evening, as the golden sun melted into the horizon, Mick's sleek black car pulled up outside a neighborhood far different from his own. Gone were the glass towers and wide, clean streets. Instead, narrow alleys wound between aging buildings with peeling paint and broken balconies. Mick stepped out, his polished shoes crunching against cracked pavement. He glanced around, his sharp eyes noticing the silence. No laughter of children, no smell of dinner from windows. Only the weight of struggle hung in the air. Victoria tugged at his sleeve. "This way," she said softly, leading him into a dimly lit stairwell. The climb was slow. Each step creaked, and the air smelled of damp wood and dust. Mick had walked through palaces and luxury penthouses, but nothing had ever made his chest ache the way these stairs did. At last, Victoria pushed open a thin, squeaky door. Inside, the apartment was painfully small. The walls were bare. The light bulb flickered weakly, and the air carried the faint scent of medicine mixed with poverty. On the corner of the room, lying on a thin mattress, was a woman. Her face was pale, her eyes half closed, her breathing shallow. Beside her, empty bottles of medicine sat scattered like fallen soldiers after a battle. The fridge door was left slightly open, and Mick noticed. Nothing was inside but a jug of water and a half loaf of bread. "Mama," Victoria whispered, rushing to kneel beside the woman. Her little hands gently touched her mother's forehead. "Mama, this is Mr. Mick. I tried to get a job, but he said I can't." She hesitated, then added with trembling hope, "But maybe he can help." The woman's eyes fluttered open. She turned her head slowly, her weak gaze landing on Mick. For a moment, shame washed over her thin features. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Sir, I'm sorry. She shouldn't have bothered you." Her voice was soft, but it carried years of exhaustion. It wasn't just sickness. It was the weight of being abandoned, of carrying life alone. Mick's heart clenched. This was not a family looking for pity. This was a family fighting a silent war with nothing but love and determination. He stepped closer, shaking his head firmly. "She didn't bother me," he said, his voice deep with conviction. He glanced at Victoria, who still held onto her mother's frail hand. She opened my eyes. The room grew still. For the first time, the ruthless millionaire CEO wasn't thinking about numbers, contracts, or profits. He was thinking about humanity. And in that tiny apartment, surrounded by emptiness, Mick discovered something greater than wealth, the raw, painful truth of life beyond his glass towers. The night after Mick visited Victoria's home, he could barely sleep. The image of that little girl holding her mother's weak hand haunted him. He realized something powerful. He had the money to buy anything in the world, but until now, he hadn't used it to heal the wounds right in front of him. At dawn, his decision was made. The morning sun stretched across the sky as Mick's car stopped once again at Victoria's broken apartment building. But this time he wasn't alone. Behind him followed a team of doctors, nurses, and men carrying bags of groceries. Victoria opened the door, rubbing her sleepy eyes. Her little mouth fell open in shock. "Mr. Mick, what is all this?" she whispered. Mick smiled gently. "This," he said, stepping inside, "is the beginning of change." The doctors immediately surrounded her mother, checking her pulse, her breathing, her frail arms. One of them looked up at Mick and nodded. She'll need treatment, medicine, and rest, but she can recover. Victoria gasped softly, her small hand flying to her mouth. Mama, did you hear that? You can get better. Her mother's weak eyes filled with tears. For years, she had hidden her pain behind silence, never wanting her daughter to see how close she was to breaking. But now, hope flickered in her chest again. Meanwhile, Mick directed his men to the kitchen. One by one, they unpacked bags. Fresh bread, milk, fruits, vegetables, meat, rice, jars of honey. The fridge, once empty and hollow, now stood proudly full. Victoria stood frozen, her little hands clutching her dress. She had never seen so much food in her life. She whispered under her breath, "It looks like magic." Mick knelt down to her level, his eyes soft but serious. He placed his hand gently on her shoulder. "Victoria," he said in a calm, fatherly tone, "from today you won't be looking for work. You'll be going to school." The girl's big brown eyes widened with shock. "School? But we don't have money. Mama said we can't." Mick shook his head, his voice steady with promise. "You don't need to worry about that anymore. I'll take care of everything." He paused, his eyes glistening slightly. "Your only job is to study, to laugh, and to dream. That's what children are meant to do." For a moment, silence filled the room. Victoria blinked, almost afraid that this was just another dream that would vanish when she woke. But Mick's warm hand on her shoulder told her it was real. Slowly, a smile spread across her face. Not the small, shy smile she gave before, but a full, innocent, glowing smile that lit up her entire being. For the first time in her short, difficult life, she felt truly free. Her mother, lying on the mattress, wiped tears from her eyes. She had prayed for a miracle, and now one stood right before her. Not a prince from a storybook, not a hero from a movie, but a man with a heart big enough to see them, to lift them, to give them dignity again. In that small room, something extraordinary happened. Hope returned. Dreams were reborn, and a new beginning for Victoria had just begun. Weeks passed, and the gray shadows that once covered Victoria's life slowly gave way to light. The little girl who once clutched a folder of desperate drawings now held colorful school books against her chest. Each morning, she proudly wore her new school uniform, neat, clean, and shining with hope. Her small shoes clicked on the sidewalk as she walked into her classroom. Instead of searching for a job, she now searched for answers to math problems. Instead of carrying the weight of survival, she carried pencils and notebooks filled with dreams. Her mother, too, was changing. With proper medicine and food, her cheeks began to glow again. She no longer coughed endlessly at night, no longer looked like she was fading away. She could sit by the window, watch her daughter leave for school, and whisper prayers of gratitude. And Mick, the powerful CEO who once lived in a glass office above the city, guarded by wealth and deals, found his own heart quietly transforming. He had always measured success by numbers, contracts, and profits. But now, every time he saw Victoria's smile, he understood something deeper. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the city in golden light, Victoria came running. Her tiny footsteps echoed down the hallway of Mick's office. She burst through the door, her cheeks pink from excitement, her school bag bouncing behind her. Without hesitation, she threw her small arms around him. "Thank you, Mr. Mick," she whispered against his chest. "You didn't just help us, you gave us a new life." Mick froze for a moment, his throat tightening. This little girl, who had once begged for a job to save her mother, was now hugging him not as a stranger, but as family. He slowly wrapped his arms around her, his voice low and emotional. "No, Victoria," he said softly. "You gave me something too. You reminded me what truly matters." For years, Mick had been surrounded by luxury. Sky-blue suits, polished cars, endless wealth. But in this moment, he realized none of it compared to the warmth of a child's gratitude. True wealth wasn't stored in bank accounts. It wasn't in tall buildings or signed contracts. It was in compassion, in lifting someone when they had no strength left, in seeing the invisible and choosing to care. As weeks turned to months, word spread, not through newspapers or media, but through whispers in the community. Neighbors watched as Victoria blossomed into a happy, laughing child. They saw how kindness had transformed not just a family, but a powerful man as well. And the lesson was clear. In a society where people often judged others by status, race, or wealth, Mick and Victoria's bond spoke louder than words. It showed that every human, rich or poor, strong or weak, deserved dignity, compassion, and hope. One evening, as Mick stood by his office window, he looked out at the glowing city. He had achieved everything money could buy, but only now did he feel truly rich. Because in helping an 8-year-old girl and her mother, he had discovered the real meaning of life. The story of Mick and Victoria became more than just a personal journey. It was a quiet but powerful reminder to everyone. Kindness can break barriers, love can heal wounds, and compassion is the greatest wealth of all.